Ding dong, the gatekeepers are dead. In a world where diversity quotas and making jokes about smashing a dollhouse over the head of gay kids determines your Oscar hopes, we're finally seeing some hope beyond the woke madness. The broken system of Hollywood with its broken values is losing its grip, and this is best illustrated in the rise of films like Backrooms and Obsession, currently taking the box office by storm. And for those who don't know, those films were basically done by independent creators who got their start on YouTube. And now behold the magnum opus, a film that may not have gotten its start on YouTube, but certainly was greenlit by independent creators. By the synopsis alone, you'll get the hint that this film is entirely different than anything you'll see coming out of Hollywood these days. Citizen Vigilante is a film about a wealthy, white American expatriate living in Croatia who becomes a brutal vigilante targeting violent criminals and corrupt judges, including Muslim immigrants, who, for fun, like to take advantage of young white women. Wait, a rich white guy is the hero? How is this possible in Mondani's America? All I can tell you is read it and weep, my dear friend, because yes, we may be on the verge of a renaissance in Hollywood. And this can be exemplified in the fact that on Rotten Tomatoes, you'll only find 3 professional critical reviews, and the audience score, well, there's a bunch of those, and it's got a 96% freshness score. Let's get this out of the way from the start. No, this is not a movie for kids, and the language is ubiquitous. You can expect moderate profanity and an incredible amount of violence and disturbing images, including a scene where a young girl is abused. And there is even nudity in a 3-minute sex scene that you will want to skip like I did. And while I'm not an official sponsor of VidAngel, you can watch this movie and cut all of that out. And I encourage you to do that because underneath all of that is a message that deserves to be heard. On that alone, you may be wondering why a conscientious critic would encourage you to watch this film. Well, one of the ways that you can figure out if a film is worth watching is by going to those aforementioned critics on Rotten Tomatoes. And we'll look at all 3 of their reviews. And if you assume the exact opposite of what they say, it will give you a window into what this movie is really all about. So let's do that. First, we have Jonathan Wilson from Ready, Steady, Cut. And he gave this movie a 0.5 out of 5. And he said, Citizen Vigilante is exactly the kind of movie utterly incurious and incomprehensible, but politically barbed for people who believe that immigrants are to blame for all the violent crimes in the West to see as a rubric for defending their homeland. And if after that review you might think Jonathan doesn't know his behind from a hole in the ground, you're not alone. But if you're watching Jonathan, I would like to introduce you to the report that details the systematic victimization of white UK women, around 250,000 of them by mostly Pakistani men. And you'll know this report because it caused the Prime Minister of England to step down. Maybe in the future, Johnny Boy will be a little bit more curious about basic facts. But how about this next doozy? This is Brian Orndorff from blue-ray.com, and he gives the movie an F. It's a big, dumb, clueless movie, and Bull wants it to be a dangerous one. Once again, he fails to understand his creative limitations. Brian might have some point in what he's saying. It's certainly not a perfect movie, but maybe this next review will give you a hint as to why Brian doesn't like it very much. This is from Todd Gilchrist of Variety, and he said the film is so astonishingly bad, it almost feels like writer-director-producer Bull is deliberately sabotaging his star Armie Hammer, whose intended comeback can only be harmed by this project. Or, and this is a big or, could it be that Hollywood canceled Armie and his comeback threatens the grip of impotent Hollywood?
Yep.
Well, let's find out. So, Citizen Vigilante is an action thriller starring Armie Hammer as Sanders, a wealthy American living in Europe who became a vigilante after losing faith in the justice system. Sanders inherits a large real estate empire and lives a relatively isolated life in Croatia. Intelligent but emotionally damaged, he becomes increasingly frustrated by violent crimes, sexual assault, and corruption that he believes are going unpunished by courts and government officials. After witnessing reports of brutal crimes and what he sees as lenient treatment of offenders, Sanders begins taking justice into his own hands. He tracks down criminals, rapists, gang members, and corrupt officials whom he believes have escaped meaningful punishment. Where did he ever get that idea?
Here in Miami was found not guilty of killing her 1-year-old daughter after she claimed a medical crisis brought on by COVID made her do it.
Unlike a traditional superhero, Sanders operates as an executioner rather than merely apprehending suspects. As news of these killings spreads, public opinion becomes divided. Many ordinary citizens begin viewing Sanders as a hero who is doing what governments and courts refuse to do. Videos and media coverage turn him into a social media phenomenon and a symbol of public frustration with crime and institutional failures. And at this point, anyone with a modicum of discernment can already read the tea leaves and be sitting on the edge of their seat. Wait. A white guy is the hero, and immigrants who flout the laws of a country to invade the country and then flout the laws of that country to take advantage of its innocent citizens are the bad people? Well, you can see this in a clip that went viral from the film.
Birds. They show their legs and breasts.
You wrote that she deserved it.
I will delete it.
Are these the values you're teaching your children?
I teach him the values from Quran and these values from our family.
I don't think it was the good ones that got out of your country. I think it was the bad ones.
Somebody call Tommy Robinson and let him know it's working. Before long, we'll get a biopic of a certain prophet and his 6-year-old spouse, and the world will then explode from a lack of gaslighting from our media. The climax of this film centers on a young girl who was assaulted by multiple attackers who were later acquitted. Sanders confronts those involved and ultimately carries out a mass execution of the perpetrators and others he views as complicit. The real powerful thing about this movie is not that it is subverting the expectations of woke Hollywood, but that it is actually taking a stand against one of the most poisonous ideas of our age. And that idea is that all cultures are basically equal. I am here to tell you that that multicultural myth is nothing but a lie, and it's bad for Western civilization because there are groups of people who believe things that are not compatible with the West. Does that give you the right to become a vigilante? No, violence is never the answer, and the Bible actually warns against vigilantism. So sorry, fellas, you're not going to be able to strap on your fatigues today, or even that crusader costume from VBS that you've been saving since you were a kid. But you can still take away a great message, and that is that the absence of good men doing the right thing will always create worse outcomes. This movie isn't perfect, and it hits you over the head with that message at times, but shoot, man. Let's give credit where credit is due. No one in Hollywood has the cojones to make a film like this, and yet here it is streaming on Amazon of all places. So while I would never encourage you to watch this movie with your children, I will encourage you to watch this film if for no other reason than for the thought experiment that arises from a movie that depicts a real issue in modern society. And here's some questions to help that experiment go off without a hitch. If all of the mechanisms that afford you freedom are destroyed, who will protect your family and who will ensure that law and justice is provided? Maybe more to the point, how many freedoms do you take for granted on a daily basis that you have been afforded by a Christian West? And if they go away, how will you ever get them back? You may not become a citizen vigilante as you ask those questions, but you may have to start taking seriously some of the real issues depicted in this film. If you take this film not as an endorsement of vigilantism, but rather the dangers of societal breakdown, I think you'll come away respecting the boldness of the subjects raised in this film. But more importantly, the questions it will raise for you as a conscientious citizen. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video and your gluttony for more great content compels you, make sure to click the video that's on the screen below. YouTube thinks you'll like it. Make sure to subscribe for more great content, but most importantly, go with God.